Things I wish I would have known before rescuing a street dog. And the disclaimer I would like to mention is, only because my dog is like this doesn't mean that if you rescue a dog from the street or a stray, doesn't mean they are the same. Obviously, every dog has their own experiences, every dog had their life events that happen to them. They have their own coping mechanisms and they have obviously their own personality and behaviors. So please keep this in mind. However, I talk to a lot of WADI dog owners, like people who adopted WADI dogs, and for most of them it's actually the same or it's quite similar. And the other thing I would like to mention is that you can see it here, they are great pets. They can make absolutely great pets. They are great dogs. However, they might just take a bit longer to adjust and they might just be a bit more work and they might need a bit more patience. The first thing I wish I would have known before adopting a stray is their level of anxiety. Quite naturally, street dogs are sometimes a bit like pessimists, or well, they are optimistic because they still trust people, they are still close to people, because this is where they get their food from, etc. However, often if they get too close, if they get too close to people, if they're too friendly, they might have experienced quite bad things. So people might have thrown stones at them. Lots of dogs, especially WADI dogs, some of them are found shot, some of them still have like bullets in their body or like shooting wounds. So they generally have experienced often not necessarily the best things. They're on the street, so you will have, depending on the age, we got him as a puppy, but depending on the age, they might have experienced different things. So they might be way more terrified of people, they might be very anxious, they have proper strange danger, etc. With this one, he's very loyal to me, he's very friendly with us. He still sometimes gets spooked. He's with us for 3 months now. He's very trusting. He's deaf, so this might be a bit of an extra challenge he has because of, you know, he's lacking one sense. So if he's out and about, he might be just a bit more fearful than other dogs. However, the level of stranger danger experience is dramatic, and I must say I kind of like underestimated how bad it actually is. Chucky and I recently had an accident where someone came, he was on the leash to try to get out of the situation, and he was pulled so strongly that I fell and twisted my ankle while my foot got stuck in a hole. So he has a massive fear of people. He has such a fear that he doesn't even want to leave the house. He wants to go out for his morning walks, which he likes, but even getting to the park can be an utter nightmare. And it's a natural fear because obviously due to experiences and from an evolutionary perspective, the dogs who were more pessimistic, who would stay away, who would be more careful, they are the ones who usually survive and have puppies, etc. So this is, I think, something, I mean, I'm not saying you can't overcome this, but from experience also from people who have rescued WADI dogs a while ago, it's something that takes time, it takes a lot of patience, it requires a lot of building trust, bonding work, relationship work, etc. So you are not like starting from scratch. You are starting with a puppy or with a dog who has had their fair share of experiences and who has their fair share of creating their personality traits and behavior. Also, if you rescue from abroad, which is often the case if you have a stray or a street dog, like I do. For example, he's from the Middle East, so it takes a certain amount of time. I adopted him in January and he was ready to travel in May. So it can take quite some time until they're ready to travel, when they had all their vaccinations, when they had basically all the checks being done until they were ready to travel. So this is something to keep in mind. It's time where you are not building your own relationship with the dog. Usually the early months are the most important ones for socialization, for building trust, for building the relationship, for bonding with the owners. And this is something with rescue dogs you often don't have. But this could also be the time where they experience negativity. So this is something to definitely keep in mind before adopting a street dog. Close to this one is also another thing I wish I would have known before adopting a street dog. And this is the level of independence. While Chucky is super loyal and he's always on my side, he's quite an independent dog. He's the easiest outside if he's off leash, where he can do his own thing. He will always stay in relatively close proximity. However, he would go a bit further away from us. So basically where he feels he's safest. So if he is somewhat limited in his movement, so for example on leash, then it can be a bit tricky. I mean, obviously due to stranger danger, but also due to many other reasons. They are roaming free dogs, so putting them on a leash can be tricky. And also they haven't necessarily been in the house, so they're quite independent dogs. They have done their thing, and to kind of like build their trust, and this is where I find game-based works best, and luckily they're quite food driven, so positive reinforcement training can help a lot. However, this is definitely something to keep in mind. Ram was a very different dog when he was younger. He was a free spirit too. However, he's a proper domesticated pet, so it was quite different in how they approach things. No matter how independent he is though, he's very, very loyal, so he chooses his person, and it's also partly breed specific, so he's most likely Pharaoh Hound mixed with Arab village dog, probably some Basenji, probably Cannon, etc. Like loads of other breeds too. We haven't done a DNA testing yet. However, so loads of these breeds have quite an independent approach to life, and this is something to keep in mind. So you might not get the dog you can take everywhere. You might not even build it up for them to be really comfortable in a city environment. They might not be the dogs who completely ever warm up to people like Rambo does. Like, he's totally fine. I can take him wherever I want. If it's a busy Saturday and we go for a coffee and he's sitting there while people are passing by, he doesn't care. He doesn't give a damn. It doesn't stress him. Very different with this one. So this is definitely something to keep in mind before adopting a street dog. Also, you don't know their story, etc. Then another thing to keep in mind, I wish I would have known before getting a street dog, and I mean this is a no-brainer, but they kind of like eat everything, and it's quite naturally, obviously, when they were finding their food in bins, etc., that they would go for it, that they would find the food, and that they would be independent in how they go about in eating things. However, he still eats everything, so we have issues with like counter surfing, trying to get in the bowl. Like Housemanners is a very different topic as well. So for example, with Rambo, it's totally not in his system. If I would have a steak, and if I would leave the steak on a plate on the sofa, and Rambo would be lying next to it, and I gotta leave the room, this boy would not even touch it. Like, he wouldn't lick it, he wouldn't smell it, like nothing. Very different with this one. It could be porridge, something like my dog is not keen on, but he would still be like, oh, what's that? And try to get his tongue in. So they eat everything, which is on one hand really, really good, because even just for a bit of kibble, he's very happy to work for it. He's very happy to engage with food. He's very easy to reward when it comes to food. However, at the beginning, you okay, babe? However, at the beginning, this could lead, and it did, to a bit of food envy with like 2 dogs in the house. So this was definitely something to manage, and to also keep my big boy here safe. He's a very different, like very picky eater, so he wouldn't touch his bowl if it would be in a slow feeder. At the beginning, he would sometimes not eat. If he's stressed, he doesn't eat, etc. If he's like really scared of something, he wouldn't eat either, but every other time he would eat. And we have I got quite creative actually on how to, in order to make him eat his food a bit slower, because yeah, he would just basically inhale his food. It would just be going down. So you will see probably a lot of videos about slow feeding bowls. I can do some reviews as well, but also you will see some ways on how I enrich the food for him, or like the experience and how he gets his food, because just giving him it in a bowl is not healthy for him, and it's just gone too quickly. Hello, baby boy. Makes it more easy to train them though. Also, when it comes to training, I want to highlight that these dogs are really smart. They are smart dogs and they love food. So yeah, you can train them obviously, and due to their love for food, or their inherited neediness of finding food, getting the food, and you know, surviving basically, makes them quite easy to train. They are also not picky. He's also happy, like he loves a pig's ear or whatever, where he would be like, ooh, it's too smelly, I wouldn't even touch it. But he is such a, it's just, I don't know how to say, but he's just very grateful, I guess, because it's just like such a pleasure to buy things for him, and he's just like excited. You can see in his eyes how they pop, and they're like, oh my god, that's so good. Where he's like, no, I'm not having this, thank you very much, no. So it's very different. So this is definitely one thing that I really enjoy about having the street dog. Another thing about the street dog, and I'm not sure if this is for every dog, but they obviously have also their behavior where they dig holes. For example, if you go to the beach or somewhere where it's warm, he would dig his hole and then he would lay down. So they are like very self-contained, I guess, and very independent again. But what he would also do is if he has, for example, a chewy bone, and Rambo wouldn't even touch it, like Rambo is totally not interested in anything I give him, like he totally has no food envy, nothing whatsoever. He would still like resource guard. I mean, I can take everything away from him without any drama, but he would still have like his possessions, but he would then run around with his bone or whatever it is, like super happy. He's like, look at me, he looks so important. And then he would eat it or like chew it, at least partly, and then if it's too big, he would hide it. He would hide it in the beds, he would dig up holes or hide it somewhere in the garden. And then he gets too stressed and he would dig it out again, and the really muddy, disgusting bit comes in the house, and I usually wash it. I wash his paws, I wash his nose, but he would be quite stressed then. So I think this is something else also to probably keep in mind, or maybe to think about, that they can be very different in how they behave around food and resources. And then the last bit I would like to highlight is house manners. When it comes to things I wish I would have known before adopting a street dog. If we get a puppy, we're quite prepared to house train them, to potty train them, to show them what is right, what is wrong, what do we want, what is not okay in the house. So basically we would train them house manners. Sometimes if we get a dog, a rescue dog, adopt a dog who's a bit older, we would expect them to have certain house manners, to be not necessarily house trained, but for them somehow to understand how things work in the house. This is not the case. So with him, he wasn't potty trained, he was in foster homes, but he still wasn't potty trained. So this was something we still had to do. I never had to do with a rescue dog before, but yeah, so this is something that could happen. Also house manners for him. Counter surfing, for example, is, I'm not saying there's only street dogs, like loads of other dogs have these behavioral issues too, obviously. But for him, counter surfing is totally normal because he smells food. So he's like, oh, there's food, I need to get it. Also, how to be around house, like calmness is something we practice quite a lot. And it's a lot of things with like any rescue dog, but I think especially for a street dog who has never been inside or who has never really lived in a house. Some of the street dogs, before you adopt them, might not have foster homes. They might be living in a pond or somewhere with like in a shelter with other dogs. So they basically have never lived in a house. And I think this is something to keep in mind before adopting a street dog. But I just want to say, whatever it is, they are worth it. I think the anxiety bit is for me like the toughest one, especially because I have like two very, very different dogs. One who loves people, one who's terrified of people. And I think it's something to just keep in mind because it requires so much patience, it requires resilience, it requires for you to kind of like change your life for a bit. So yeah, this is definitely something to keep in mind. Also, maybe one last thing to highlight. So for example, with him, crate training, which you would potentially be able to do with a rescue dog or with any puppy, etc., is very, very tricky for him because the only time he has ever been in a crate was when he went on, I mean, he was trained before, but to get into the crate, etc., but he was not used to being in a crate and having a crate as a safe place. So he more or less just knows the crate from, well, an 8-hour flight and then being basically on the journey from the Middle East to the UK, which is a very long journey. So yeah, this is definitely something to keep in mind when you adopt a street dog. But as I said, for me, they're absolutely worth it, and I wouldn't miss this boy, and I love him to pieces. Yes, I do with my big boy, of course, too. Wow, big stretch. Big, big stretch. That is two very good boys, yes.